This episode is sponsored by The Artist JD, a place designed to add ease to the legalese of running your creative business. If you're a maker, designer, or shop owner, then you should consider joining The Artist Courtyard. It functions as your creative business's legal guide, mentor, sounding board, and resource library. Seize dream opportunities when they arise because your business is built on a strong foundation. Visit theartistsjd.com to learn more and use the code WHILESHENAPS at checkout to get 50% off your first month. Thank you so much, The Artist JD. And now, here's the show. Welcome to episode 141 of the While She Naps podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today, we're talking about becoming a professional quilter with my guest, Amy Friend. I have the pleasure of visiting Amy's studio today in West Newbury, Massachusetts. We live about 45 minutes away from one another, and it's always so nice to be able to visit somebody in person. So I'm very glad to be here, Amy. Amy Friend is a former museum curator turned designer. She designs unique modern quilts and specializes in paper piece designs. She's authored 2 books, Intentional Piecing, From Fussy Cutting to Foundation Piecing, which came out in 2016, and Improv Paper Piecing, a modern approach to quilt design, which came out a year later in 2017. Both were published by Lucky Spool Media. Amy travels to guilds to speak about her quilts and teach workshops. Her home is a mid-19th century Massachusetts home formerly inhabited by a comb maker, shoemaker, and Morgan horse breeder. In her free time, you're most likely to find Amy in the garden, baking or driving her 3 children to activities. You can follow her creative path on her blog, duringquiettime.com, or on Instagram at During Quiet Time. Amy Friend, welcome.
Thank you for visiting me.
Yeah, it's really nice to be here. And I'd love to start by talking a little bit about where we are. So if you can tell us a little bit about your home. I know we mentioned about its history in the introduction, but tell me a little bit more about it and also maybe a little bit about West Newbury and how you ended up here.
I grew up here. So I did move away for college and graduate school in the first 8 years or so we were married, but then moved back to have our family here. But West Newbury is coastal Massachusetts near Newburyport. People have heard of that more frequently. We're right off 95, a little bit south of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. This whole area used to be Newbury way back 200 or so years ago. We became West Newbury. It's actually the bicentennial of the town right now this year. And we split off from Newburyport and became West Newbury. And it's a rural town with lots of farming still. We have 4 or 5 Christmas tree farms in town. And the comb industry was huge here about 200 years ago as well. Then we moved into shoemaking and then more agriculture. And now, of course, it's a lot of people commuting into Boston or Cambridge or working from home.
Okay. And this home in particular?
This is a home from about 1835 to 1850. We just recently had some historical surveys done in town. And actually, I wrote the grant for that. I was on the historical commission at the time. And our house was included in the survey. So we know that the dates were between those years and that the first inhabitant was a comb maker, which meshes with the town's history. And most recently, a Morgan horse breeder lived here. And that's why we have a big barn out back. No longer are there any horses there, though. But I love history and I love older homes. And so I put up with the draftiness in winter and things like that because I just love the feel and the history of the house.
And so you said that town's bicentennial was just this year,
yep.
Right? And you created a really special quilt for the town that was based on the motif of combs.
Right.
And these are like women's combs that women would kind of put into their hair in a decorative way, or would they actually use them to comb their hair?
It was both. So the comb industry, it used to be that combs were imported from England here to the United States, and so they were very, very expensive. And they were tended to be made out of ivory and materials that weren't readily available here, and there weren't skilled laborers here. So right up the road from me, actually, in 1759, I believe, Enoch Noyce started the comb industry, and his were made out of wood that he cut with a jackknife. And they were initially just regular hair combs, like just to comb your hair. One was even called a louse comb, which is really gross. But then they moved into creating combs out of tortoise shell and cow horn that were decorative for women's hair.
Okay.
So those are the ones I pictured in the
Right.
quilt I made, because
Yeah.
I figured the other kinds of combs would not be as attractive.
You don't need a quilt of louse combs.
No.
And so how did this quilt come about? And there's pictures of it on your website if people want to check it out, and I'll put a picture of it in the show notes too. But so it sounds like the town of West Newbury commissioned you to create a quilt that would in some way commemorate the bicentennial, and you kind of came up with this idea of the comb quilt. I'm just wondering how this collaboration between you as an artist and the town came to be, and then sort of you can talk a little bit about your process of coming up with the quilt.
Well, I mentioned to you before that this is a very small town, so we all know each other. So the people who are on the West Newbury Cultural Council know me, and that they know that I am a quilter. And they're familiar with my work. So when they were brainstorming ideas of how they could contribute to the town's bicentennial, they put a quilt out there as an idea along with sculpture and painting, and quickly agreed on a quilt. And then they asked me because they knew me. And they were very nice because they just allowed me to take it in any direction I wanted. And I actually wasn't sure that I was going to be a good fit for them at first, because when you think of a bicentennial quilt, I figured they would want it to appear historical or to have like a feeling of an earlier quilt. And I wanted to make sure that they knew that I liked modern quilt design and wanted to, incorporate that as well. And they were actually very accommodating, said, just show us a quick mock-up. It did, and then they let me go from there.
How did you explain what modern quilt design was? I mean, I think that for somebody who really isn't a quilt aficionado, right, who's just sort of like, quilts, I get it. I know what a quilt is, and that's about all they know. To say to them, there's a difference between a traditional quilt and a modern quilt, that might be new news to them. Right. And so, they would know the difference between a modern art that you would see in a modern art museum. Okay. Abstract shapes, that kind of non-representational. Okay. Versus, art that was more representational. They could see that difference. But I'm just wondering, did you use that analogy, or how did you explain to them, like, I'm a modern quilter?
I think that they were pretty familiar with my work already, which helped just because, I gave a talk at the library when my first book came out. Some of them were there. The woman who is the head of the council right now is a painter herself. So she's more in tune. She's also knows exactly what I'm working on. She's my neighbor a few doors down. So I did mention that I wanted to use some alternate grid work in the layout, and I explained what that was. That I didn't want just a single repeating block design, that I wanted to change that layout a little bit, that I was picturing some negative space in the background with the year that the comb manufacturing began in the town. I did say that I wanted to make brown combs because they did tend to be brown. They tended to be brown through like a dark charcoal, and those aren't normally colors I would work with, and they don't really scream modern to me. But I wanted to use those, but choose fabrics I might choose otherwise for a quilt. So I wasn't looking for
like a Civil War print or something. You were going to maybe use a solid,
a textured solid,
right? Okay.
Something that would suit my tastes. And then also, I mentioned that I would want to quilt it myself with some straight line quilting. I just described, what I was envisioning, that I liked the idea of combs because I saw them as a really strong abstract shape. So I wanted to, use the shape, but I wanted to not make it exactly, an applique, let's say, that might have had more detail in it. I wanted to make a simplified abstract comb shape and use it as a graphic element And I think that they got it, and they were willing just to see how it turned out.
Right. Okay. And so where is that quilt now? Does it hang somewhere in town, or how did that work?
It's at the library awaiting hanging.
Okay.
So it will be hung in the town library, but it's just not quite up yet.
Okay, great. And so you said you grew up around here. Is the house you grew up in like right nearby, or?
It's down the Newburyport end of the same road.
Okay, right. And I know that I read when I was doing some research before I came that you've said that a sewing machine table was a piece of living room furniture in your house when you were growing up. Is that the case?
I was trying to think of that. Yeah, we had like a little, my mom had a sewing machine that folded into the table, and the top came over, and that was next to our couch, and it had like a lamp on it or something. And it was just, right there in the living room.
Right. So you could pop up the sewing machine as needed. Right. Okay. And so what did your parents do for work?
My dad was a probation officer in Newburyport, and my mom held several different jobs during the course of our growing up years. She was originally a teacher until I was born, and then she stayed home with us for a while. Then she was a teacher again and brought us to the school with her. So we went to the private school where she taught for a few years. And then she went back to school, and then she started to work in the biotech industry by the time I was in college.
Okay. And were either of them artists or makers, even if it wasn't necessarily their career? Were they sort of doing that in their spare time?
My mom always wanted to be. So I think if her parents had allowed her to be an art major, she would have been. Mm-hmm. And she was always very creative. She was, she'd make things for the church fair and sew our clothes and things like that.
Okay. And so she taught you to sew?
Yeah.
And what did you used to make with her, or once you learned?
She was a garment sewer. Like, she grew up making all of her own clothes throughout high school. Very detailed garments like coats with plackets and buttons, and fitted skirts with linings and things like that. And her mother also sewed extremely well. So they both taught me. We would sew things like Halloween costumes or simple baby outfits that I would then maybe sell at a fair or give as gifts, that sort of thing.
And were you excited about sewing, or was it one of these things where you sort of felt like it wasn't really your thing?
I think it was just one of many things I was trying at the time.
Yeah. It wasn't like an obsession.
No, if I wanted to make something, there was a possibility that I could sew it, or I could mold it out of clay, or I could...
It was just a
whatever.
Thing. Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. And so when you went to college, where did you go to college, and what did you end up, you studied art history, or what did you end up studying in college?
I ended up studying art history up at Bates College in Lewiston, Maine.
Oh, yeah.
So I went thinking that I was going to be a science and art double major. And I was thinking of some way I could include academics that I really loved and art. And my brain at the time thought maybe medical book illustration, which went out the window really quickly. Initially, I had a hard time getting into a couple of the science and art classes that I needed. So freshman year, I signed up for the art history requirement, and I took a class called Islamic art, and it just clicked. I absolutely loved it. I loved studying the religion combined with art and history combined with art. And I had never taken an art history class before.
They don't really offer it in high school. I also took a lot of art history in college, and it was really eye-opening, and I loved it as well. And I had never even considered that it was a thing before I went to college. Yeah.
I didn't know about it either.
Yeah.
And I keep telling my kids the same thing. Like, they don't know what they want to study. I'm like, well, you might not have even learned about it
what
yet.
Is right, what there is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So did art history end up being your major then?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And did you take studio art classes too, or not really?
Yeah, it was sort of almost it wasn't quite half and half. Maybe a third studio art classes were required, and then I took some more that I didn't need to. I also took a theater design class where we got to craft like costume parts and things like that.
So cool.
I used sewing there.
College is wasted on the young. That is so cool. Yeah.
I know. I would love to go back to that class again now.
Yeah. Okay, great. So when you graduated from Bates, did you get a job? What did you end up doing? Did you get a job in a museum right away? I know you worked as a museum curator before having kids. So was that your first job too, or did you do something else for a little while?
No, I graduated a semester early. And so during that semester, I worked in Rockport in one of the art galleries.
Oh, yeah. We vacationed in Rockport years ago. It's beautiful.
It is. So I sold artwork on commission there for about 6 months or so. And then I went to the University of Delaware, where I completed my master's coursework in art history, focusing on American material culture. And then I got married. So I came back up and we got married. And then I got my first job in museums. So it's really, really hard to find museum work, and it's hard to break into the whole museum field. And I never really had the opportunity to do internships because internships aren't paid, and I always needed to be, getting some sort of income. So I didn't have the internship experience either. So I saw a listing for an assistant to the director at the Museum of Transportation in Brookline, and I applied and I got that job, and it certainly wasn't what I wanted, but it was a museum job. And once I started working there, I realized that they did not have a curator. In fact, they had no one taking care of the collections at all. So I started just pointing out, what we could do and room for improvement. And so quickly I became their first curator. So I worked there for about 5 years, building the collections care component of the museum. And then I moved to the Wheaton College art department, where I was their collections curator.
So what does that mean? When you were in Brookline, what does that mean? You realized they didn't have a curator and you started pointing out what they could do. What are some examples for people who, maybe myself included, who maybe aren't in that world and maybe wouldn't know what that actually specifically referred to? So they had all of these objects and they were on display. So what hole did you see that could have been filled better?
So many things. They had collections care was one thing. So they had a hayloft where the items were stored. It was in an old carriage house, I should mention. The museum was located in an old carriage house, and the hayloft was where they stored all of the objects. There was no climate control. There was a lot of dust. There were some insect and rodent problems. So a lot of ways that the collections were being damaged. So I started talking about archival materials and how we could better package and store each item, and the fact that they didn't have accession numbers, which are numbers that are given to objects as they enter into a museum collection. And you're supposed to track that object with that number throughout its time at the museum. If it goes out on loan or is out on display, you change its location in software, which they also didn't have. So all of those things, forms for accepting gifts, forms for making loan arrangements, pretty much everything you could think about wasn't being done at that point. That it was more of a car club, I would say, atmosphere-wise, and not a museum.
Right. It wasn't really formalized.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you were helping them to sort of move into that phase of saying this is really a museum and needs to be treated that way.
Right. So it's very challenging, especially because it was mostly older men and I was right out of college.
Right. And I'm sure that was your ideas were not necessarily met with open arms on a daily basis.
Right. No,
right.
Especially because I didn't want objects being touched and handled and used, and because that usually shortens their lifespan. And of course, that was not what they wanted to hear.
Right. Right. Interesting. And maybe we'll talk in a little while about whether some of those skills in some way, in some sort of, sideways way come into play now in the work that you do. You can let me know, but it's an interesting, you have to get a little bit tough, it kind of helps you to develop a thicker skin maybe. Yep. I want to take a minute now to talk with our sponsor, The Artist JD, and the founder of The Artist JD, Tiffany Staley.
I am Tiffany Staley, and I am the founder of the Artist JD.
And how does the Artist JD help creative business owners?
So the Artist JD helps creative business owners by adding ease to the legalese of running your creative business.
Okay, so what does that mean? I know you're a lawyer and I know you work with creative business owners. So how do you add ease to the legalese?
So the primary way that I add ease to the legalese for creative business owners is through our membership community, the Artist Courtyard. And it helps add ease in 4 different ways. You have the ability to get your questions answered through our online private community that's off Facebook. So you have 24/7 access to me and the members of our community. You can get ongoing guidance from me through online workshops and monthly Q&A sessions. You get access to the tools and resources you need to tackle legal projects through our legal library. We've got courses in there about registering your copyrights, creating your LLCs, and we're just getting ready to start talking about how to negotiate contracts and talking a little bit more about licensing deals. And then no one really wants to do legal projects that don't actually advance their business. And so I've put together a kind of legal roadmap that helps you pinpoint what legal projects will actually make a big impact in your business, depending upon where you are on your journey.
Oh, wow. So this is fantastic. And is it more affordable than actually, let's say, hiring a lawyer to do some of these things for you, which can get really expensive?
So I'm not providing individualized legal support for these businesses in the community. And because of that, it's incredibly affordable. You can join for as low as $9 a month.
Right. And you basically learn how to navigate this stuff yourself.
Exactly. So it's kind of designed for those who are at a point that they can't afford to pass it off, but really want to build that strong legal foundation so that they can achieve their goals, so that they can achieve their version of success, so that they can seize the opportunities when they land in their lap.
Tiffany, where can people go to learn more?
Yeah, so you can go to the artistjd.com, and then in the header, you can see the Let's Work Together. And there you can find a link to our community as well as other resources that I have available for creative business owners.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tiffany. This sounds fantastic.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you so much, the Artist JD. And now back to my conversation with Amy. All right, so I'm just wondering how you first got introduced to quilting, because it sounds like you knew how to sew, you understood art history and art, fine art, making art yourself. And so you had all of the sort of maybe necessary ingredients that create a quilter, but you weren't a quilter yet. And so I'm wondering what the introduction was. Was there a specific exhibit you went to? I know for so many modern quilters, going to see the quilts of Gee's Bend was really something that turned them on to quilting. I don't know if that was the thing for you, or if it was something else that you saw or encountered, or a person that you met that you suddenly sort of realized that quilting was something that maybe you should do too.
I wish I remembered more now what it was, but I really don't. My son, who's now 16, when he was born, I wanted to make him items for his nursery. So I made curtains, and then I wanted to make some sort of blanket. So I think it just kind of evolved from, the idea of making small items for my children. And then I was at home at that point. So I started looking online. I found a lot of the modern quilt blogs that were just starting.
Yeah, because 16 years ago, that was really in the beginning.
Right. I think they were just starting to pop up. And so, I worked the first few years he was born. So it was maybe 13 years ago that I was really looking at the blog.
2005, something.
Yep, exactly. Because that's when my second daughter, my first daughter, my second child was born. So I was looking at the blogs, and I started seeing these things, and I thought, quilting had never really appealed to me before. It appealed to me in the historical sense. I wanted to know why the quilts were made, who made them, but it didn't interest me. I didn't feel like I wanted to make them. I didn't like the dark colors or the repetition of a lot of the patterns, and it just didn't hit me that way. But when I looked at the these new blogs that were popping up, I just thought, oh, maybe quilting could be interesting and I would like this. And so I started, following some of the tutorials and learning a little bit about how quilts should be made.
So do you remember what the first quilt blog was that you saw or that you found or how you found it? I'm just sort of curious about like how the entry point was, like, what got you to decide, okay, I'm going to Google this, or it may have not even been Google, but how you went down that path,
I know I was on the Sew Mama Sew website. And I'm sure that was part of it. And then reading, there were a lot of links to
other people.
Else.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that was probably my starting point.
Okay.
And then Amanda Jean had a 9-patch sew along, way back at, somewhere in that time period. And I did that. And then
some of these are like a community, both of those are sort of community engagement, where Sew Mama Sew was having guest posts from lots of different people and showing their work. And then a sew along where you can, everybody can participate, maybe link up or post on Flickr or something like that, what you're making.
Yeah, and I got into Flickr very quickly because that was where it was at.
That Flickr was where it was at, exactly. Yeah. And you would participate and everybody would post their pictures and see what everybody else was doing.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Okay. All right, so that was the beginning. And then how long after that did you start your blog?
I started my blog when I was pregnant with my third child. This is how I remember all my years.
Yeah, of course, right? It's always like I was pregnant with you. And then,
So that was 2009. No, she was born 2009. So 2008 or 9.
Okay, so a few years later.
Yeah, so that's when I started my blog. It was my husband's idea because he saw me reading all the blogs and he's like, well, you could do this. Why don't you start a blog? And he literally, sat down and said, okay, what do you want to call it? And he started filling it out for me. And I'm like, I don't know. I sew during quiet time. And he's like, okay, during quiet time. And that's the whole story of my blog name.
Well, here we are, because I'm While She Naps. So we might as well have the same blog name.
Kind of
I know.
And I thought about changing it, but I'm
Me
still
too. It's like, what are you going to do?
It's too late now.
It's too late now. Exactly. I feel the same way.
The quilting is still my quiet time. Now it's not when they're sleeping. It's when they're at school.
Right.
Or it's in the evening once we've at least said, go to your bedroom.
Right.
If they're not sleeping. But yeah, it's kind of stuck.
It is what it is. Exactly. Okay. So that was the beginning. And were you always, from the start, writing about what you're writing about now? Like, has it changed what you were blogging about?
Yeah, I think initially I was, making things from tutorials that were available, making items for the kids, sharing more about Halloween costumes and
it was personal.
Little things that I made for them. Yeah. And then it evolved more into pattern writing later on. So when I discovered paper piecing, that was kind of where it clicked for me. And I'm like, oh, this is the direction that I want to go in. And so then I started designing my own paper piecing patterns and joining a lot of swaps on Flickr. There was a bee that we had where we each picked a theme and we made our own paper piece blocks each month. And I started running swaps. I had 13 rounds of potholder pass on Flickr.
Okay.
Because people kept wanting to do more and I was meeting a lot of people and it was fun. And they were just small quilted items people could quickly make and send out. So that was great because it helped me to meet a lot of people and got a lot of people to know what I was doing at the time. So things just kind of gradually grew. I started getting contacted by different companies to see if I wanted to use some of their materials. So I worked with Basic Ray for a while and I designed quilt patterns for them. I worked with Art Gallery. They would send me fabric and I'd make tutorials. I worked with Sizzix for a while as I forget what it was called, design team, on their design team, where they would send different new dyes and I would create tutorials and projects with those. I did that for quite a while, and I think it was all very good experience. It helped me to understand things like the need for watermarks on images, and all of that came out of my time on the Sizzix design team. So each step in the journey really, I think, helped.
Right, because when you started the blog, or even just when you started making quilts, it wasn't to intentionally begin a business.
No.
it was because you were interested in teaching yourself this new skill and exploring a new avenue. And your husband encouraged you to jump in and record it publicly along with everybody else who seemed to be doing the same.
Right.
And maybe meet people with similar interests while you were home with children. And that was it. And then
it was just a creative outlet. Really.
Right. Right. And then these business opportunities came your way. And so now would you characterize what you do as a business?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So I kind of, once I realized, the direction I was heading, I kind of came up with a little plan for myself that I would wait until my youngest was in kindergarten. And that's when I would start working on my first book. So that's when it really became business versus like slightly income earning hobby.
Yeah, I had a slightly income earning hobby for many years. Yeah.
I mean, because I would sell patterns on Etsy, but
Sure.
that was really it, and it wasn't the same.
So how did it change when you decided that okay, now it's a business? What did that mean? What did that change look like? When you made that mental shift. I mean, it's a mental shift,
Right.
really,
I think
right?
a lot
First,
of
it's
it,
a
my
mental
attitude
shift.
changed.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did that manifest, though, in real life once your attitude made that shift?
I got a lot busier, and I felt like it was just a constant balance of the second the kids are out of the house, I'm working on something, and then so it's a lot of balancing now. And it meant that I would do a little bit more travel because I started to talk to guilds or do workshops. But that have increased slowly over the last couple of years now that my kids are just that little bit older still. I guess I started to think about things more from a business perspective too, how to better share my patterns, which patterns were more successful. I've always wanted to make things though that I want to make. So I'm not the best business person because if I don't want to make it, I don't. So I know that my best-selling pattern is not a paper piece pattern. It's a jelly roll pattern. But that's just not my main focus. So I'm happy to continue selling that pattern and promoting it. And I like that pattern. But I need to really love what I'm doing and love what I'm making. So I tend to design things that have a smaller audience. People who want to sew more complex paper pieced projects.
Because that's what you like. Right. Exactly. I understand completely. Yes.
So I know it's not a good business move, but it's just what I like.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So what is paper piecing? So for people who maybe are listening to the show, but aren't necessarily quilters or have dabbled in quilting, but don't necessarily know what that is, explain what paper piecing is.
So it's also called foundation piecing. Sometimes people, hear that term more often. It basically means that you draw your pattern out on paper and then you follow the lines. You stitch along the lines and you flip your fabric on the opposite side so that your finished block is on the opposite side of your drawing. It's really hard to describe, I feel like. So your block is the reverse image of what you've drawn on the front. It's all done with straight lines, and it can be multiple sections. They're joined together to create one block.
And it allows you to basically kind of almost draw in a way with fabric.
Right, and that's why I love it. It's because I think there's a lot more freedom of expression with paper piecing. It's not limited to squares, rectangles, half square triangles, all of which I like, and I like quilts made out of them. But I just feel like I always want to make sure my designs are unique, and I want to try really hard not to copy anyone else. And so if you're drawing your own paper piece block, I feel like that's a good way to start and make sure that it's your own. So that's always been really important to me too.
Mm-hmm. And so you said that when you discovered paper piecing, that's what really clicked for you. And how did you discover it?
Flickr.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think it was actually someone whose name I can't remember right now was looking for a pattern tester for a paper piece pattern. So I'm like, well, I don't know how to paper piece, but I'll try it. And so she sent it to me and said, just look at this tutorial first. And so I looked at a tutorial and then I tried it and I realized oh, okay, I like how this works. And I'm very mathematical too. So it clicked for me pretty easily. I think you have to have good spatial skills for paper piecing, and otherwise it's a little harder to catch on.
It scratches a certain kind of itch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I love to design in 3 dimensions, and there's people who love it and people who hate it. But it's like for me, it scratches a certain kind of itch to be able to turn a flat piece of paper into a 3-dimensional object. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's there's enough, I don't know how to describe it, but there's enough like thought that has to go into it combined with creativity. Like, is it sewable? Does it have a sewable order? How could I eliminate some sections to make it pieced more easily? There's lots of things to be thinking about all the time. And I really like that. Like I like challenges.
Okay. And so, so you started to do this, started to create paper piece patterns that kind of appealed to somebody who was a little bit more interested in a complex pattern. And then you got the opportunity to write these 2 books with Lucky Spool. And I really love Lucky Spool as a publisher. And I think, especially, for quilting. And I think if you're going to write a book now for a quilting book, I think that would be a really great choice as a publisher. So I'm just wondering how you came to know Suzanne Woods. And you must know Suzanne, who's the I guess the publisher of Lucky Spool, and how that very first book came about.
I remember really clearly, I read a post that Suzanne had made when she was just starting Lucky Spool, and she was describing what her ideas were for the company. And I just sent her a quick email saying, I'm so glad you're doing this. I love what you're trying to do. And she wrote,
which is to say, like, publish less books a year, publish high quality books, really work with the author so that the book is what the author really wants it to become. And am I describing
exactly all those things?
All of those things,
and really like a personal connection too. And I read that and I'm like, oh, this sounds like what I'd like. And I didn't approach her saying I wanted to write a book. I just said, I love what you're doing. And she wrote back, and then we ended up meeting at Fall Quilt Market that year and just brainstorming ideas for a book. And she came up with the title Intentional Piecing because she had looked at a lot of my work and said, well, I think you do a lot of fussy cutting. And I did at the time, more so than now. And she said, what about something fussy cutting related? And I thought that would sound like a really fun concept for a book. And so we started brainstorming ideas, and I knew I wanted to bring in some other things like stripes, like how to keep fabrics directional. So kind of expanding the idea of a fussy cut from not just isolating a motif, but making better use of your fabric for the particular pattern and making that connection sort of. And so she came up with the title of Intentional Piecing, and I'm like, yes, that's it. That's exactly it. So that's how that one started.
I see. Yeah. So definitely an advantage of going to an in-person event like Quilt Market or QuiltCon, where you're going to be, rubbing shoulders with a publisher, just that connection where you're face to face with somebody and can talk to them and brainstorm, and also the value too of not being afraid to send an email to somebody just to say, doesn't have to be a formal pitch or anything like that, but just to say, what you're doing is great and I am a fan. And, that was really all it is. And not cheesy, just really authentically that was how you felt. And so,
I just thought that was refreshing.
Right. So. Because I don't know if you had heard, had you had friends who had published books and had different experiences?
Yeah, I had just heard stories or read about them online. I hadn't approached any companies at that point either. I mean, this was before, it was right before I think that my daughter entered kindergarten. So it's just when I was starting to think of things more at the business.
Right, exactly. Okay, good. So, and then what did you feel like you learned from that experience? I mean, I know you said, working with Sizzix and working with each of these art gallery and the other companies that you had these opportunities to work with, you learned something, and I agree with you, from each of those interactions where, there are marketing departments asking for this, and you didn't realize that was a thing that you're supposed to be doing, like watermarking photos or whatever it might be. So in my experience, having written books, that's actually a huge learning experience and a huge growth experience. We aren't necessarily formally trained to do whatever it is you call what we do now. And so you kind of get on the job training and writing a a book is a really good on-the-job training experience. I'm wondering what you pulled away from that.
Well, it's a good thing. I was already very good about budgeting my time and being very organized, and all of that was extremely important. So I think it gave me more confidence in myself, more than learning particular technical skills or anything else, because I already am very detail-oriented and organized. And I did learn that I had to be confident and keep working even if I wasn't receiving any feedback, or if there was, because, working with Suzanne, there were often like months where we wouldn't communicate, and I just need to be working on my book by myself.
Right.
And so,
because that's how it works. You don't turn in, project by project.
Right. So then I start questioning. I think that's where some people will get stuck too. They'll start questioning, like, am I doing this right? Do we still have this deal? Kind of questioning the whole thing. And I just learned that I had to keep going, just end goal, and keep moving. And I think that was important. And I just loved the experience because Suzanne let me really design the book myself. Every project that I submitted was included in the book. Nothing was taken out, nothing was changed. I was able to do all the photography myself because I wanted to have New England represented in a book, because so many of these books are shot in areas that are not like this area. And I just wanted to kind of have it look like me in the area that I'm working in.
Especially since this area, as we talked about, is so rich in history and quilts, it makes sense. I mean, it seems like, even though it's modern quilting, it's a great juxtaposition.
But I love that. Yeah. I love the modern quilts in historic settings. I think it's
beautiful.
I like that. So there was a lot of experience there too, in taking good photos. I had to show her some photos from my blog from, prior to that, but it was certainly a new level of stress involved with each photograph. So I learned a lot more that way too.
Mm-hmm. And then once the book came out, talk about a confidence boost. At least for me, I know, I just felt different. I mean, I felt like a different person, and I'm sure your kids must have been really excited. Or were they not impressed?
I think they more get it now than they did at the time.
They were
like,
little.
Look, this is a book.
Right.
But I think that now they're impressed that I've written a couple of books. And now they kind of get it a little bit more. But yeah, I think people start taking your work more seriously. Mm-hmm. And not just people in the industry, but just people in your daily life.
Right. Because a book is something people understand.
Right. If you're home quilting, people kind of look at you questioningly, but if you say, I was at home writing a book, then they see it more as actual work.
Right, exactly. And I know you live in a small town and people here know you, but, peers of yours, maybe parents of kids who go to school with your kids, do they understand what you do? I mean, do you feel like they get it, or do they think that you're home quilting and how does that even work kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of them get it. I'm the mom who's home, so it's easy to ask me to pick up a kid, or I run Girl Scouts. So they just assume, I think, that I have a lot of time and that I'm at home and using my time to quilt, and that's just
like baking cookies.
Fun. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they realize.
Not that baking cookies isn't also a job.
I like to do that too.
and it could also become a very serious job. Yes.
It could. But I don't think that many of them appreciate the deadlines that I'm under and how many hours I put in a week. Most of them don't know that I travel to teach and things like that.
Right. And how did you begin traveling to teach? Because I know that that's something that a lot of people really would like to do. And I'm wondering, did you start at your is there a local quilt shop here in town? And did you start there and then expand out? Because being on that sort of, regional guild circuit and then on the national circuit or even international circuit is something so many people really would like to be able to do. And you seem to, I remember meeting you for the first time at QuiltCon, and I know you were just at QuiltCon a few weeks ago and had a full, circuit of classes that you were teaching there. And that's such a huge goal for so many people. So I'm wondering how you sort of got to that stage.
I think a lot of it is in accepting opportunities. I've tried to be really open to that. So it was before either book, a guild in New Hampshire invited me to come talk. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And, and I went and I just did that. And a guild in Boston also invited me to talk. And I didn't know what to charge them. They just told me what they would pay me. And I went and I did it. So I think just taking any of those opportunities that you're given is a really good way to start. We now have a local quilting shop in the center of town, but we didn't have anything like that at the time. So I didn't start that way. But it was really with the second book that I was invited to many more guilds and started traveling more for that. And at that point, I could accept more of it. I never publicized too much about my willingness to travel or to teach because of the kids, and it was just too hard to go away. But by the time,
we should say your husband works full-time in Boston,
exactly,
which is quite a commute from here. So yeah.
My kids aren't driving age yet. Well, one of them is just learning, but I really need to be home and being a parent,
right?
And be a parent. So, with the second book, by then that was 2017. So it was, the kids were older. It was a little bit easier, and guilds started inviting me to travel, which involved more traveling.
Okay. And so you started saying yes to those.
Right.
And then applying to teach have you taught at a festival in Houston or no?
No.
Is that a goal or is that not something you want to do? Not interested?
At the moment, I'm not. No.
Yeah.
I applied to teach at QuiltCon 2 times, and I've gone those 2 times when it's been on this coast.
Right.
And I applied to teach at the Vermont Quilt Festival a couple years ago and went there. But other than that, it's just been guilds invitations.
Okay, got it. And I'm wondering if you can share some highlights and maybe some lowlights from those teaching experience, maybe some things that you felt like, some moments that you remember from teaching that have been really enlightening or just been satisfying or, really positive for you, or things that you've learned from teaching, and maybe a moment or two that was just frustrating or difficult or funny or, something from teaching that has been hard.
It's a hard one. It's always, my favorite thing is when someone leaves and says that they were really inspired. Like for me, that's the best compliment, to know that something just really hit them and they were eager to try out the technique or to make more. What's frustrating is when people repeatedly tell me during class that they don't like paper piecing. And that happens a lot. And I wonder, why they signed up to do a paper piecing class if they came into it with the idea that they didn't like it. So I tried to help them, technically, to make it a little bit easier in hopes that they'll like it. But it's always a little bit frustrating. Because of course I want everyone to like paper piecing because I think it's the best.
Right.
So that's frustrating. But I've met some people who, they had never paper pieced. I taught them to paper piece. They got really excited. And now they've, joined my swaps and, bought my books and are making their quilts. And it's very nice to see them progress from their very first paper piece block all the way to making much more complicated projects, and knowing that I actually had a part in that. And then occasionally, getting a note in the mail from one of them thanking me for that is really very nice.
Yeah, lovely. Exactly. And it sounds like even from those early Flickr days and now you run sew-alongs and swaps and sort of, online community experiences for people who enjoy sewing and enjoy quilting. And there's a lot of bloggers out there and designers who would like to run a successful sew-along. But it's a little intimidating, like that feeling of, well, what if nobody signs up for this? And, what if nobody follows through and participates? And so I wondered, since you do have a good deal of experience in setting these up and making them run, if you could share some tips for how to run a successful sew-along.
So I haven't done a sew-along per se, but I've done swaps.
Okay.
So with the swaps, I think really tight guidelines are extremely important. So I like to plan a swap just like I plan a workshop or a Girl Scout meeting, where I go through, each step of the way and how it might work and what questions might come up along the way, and try to answer them all. So I try to come up with swap ideas that would mostly the people could mostly pull from their stashes because people don't tend to like to purchase fabric for a swap. I've learned to keep postage costs low because that allows you to open up internationally and also just makes it more affordable because if you're sending out to 10 people in a swap, that can be a lot. Keeping deadlines short because I tried extending deadlines at one point, like trying longer swaps to see if people were then done by the deadline, but no, they just push it off. So keep the time frame short.
So no matter, people procrastinate no matter how long. Yeah.
Just keep following up. I send a lot of reminder emails. Back to keeping the guidelines really tight. I like to try to think about how will the people who receive these items feel. So how can I make the guidelines tight enough so that people enjoy making them and have some room for creativity, but that everyone's going to be happy with what they receive because it's what they expect. So, thinking about all those things. You have to be really well organized. I have like a spreadsheet for each swap and mark when people send their items and follow through with those who haven't. It's just, you have to realize you're going to put in time.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. To create an experience for this community of people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have a pretty large selection of patterns that you sell. It sounds like you've been selling patterns for a long time. So you had these patterns for sale on Etsy before you really felt like you had a business when you kind of had your hobby business.
Right.
And now, I mean, even the combs from the comb quilt, there's some of them are available as a pattern, which I love because I think, the best way to organize this sort of thing and make it worth your while is to make everything do double duty. So if you're going to do a commission quilt, then also why not make those pieces become a pattern that you can earn money from also,
I hadn't even intended to do that, but people started asking. So
and then, if demand is there, absolutely. So how many of those patterns are in print that are, available as print patterns? Is it a lot of them?
I think it might be about 15 or 20, somewhere in that range.
Our print patterns.
Print. I've found that PDF sales are much better for me.
Really?
So I'm not pursuing a lot of printed patterns.
Okay. And the printed ones are carried through distributors that are in quilt shops.
Yeah, and I sell them online too.
And you sell them online, right, as well. Okay. And so do you spend now a lot of your time like packing and shipping orders to distributors and all of that stuff? I mean, does that take time or?
It does.
Yeah.
And you don't know when the orders are coming. So you think you have your day planned.
Right.
And then there's an order. And, it went from being, yay, I got an order to like, I got an order. Because I know it, now I have to, take the time to pack it. And sometimes it means I have to assemble some more patterns because I have them in pieces in the boxes. And I have to go and, staple them and bag them because I do most of the steps myself to keep the costs lower.
Right. And do you print them at home or do you? No, you have them printed. Yeah.
Much better quality that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're all in my basement and then I have to go down to the basement where it's cold. And
mine are out in the barn.
Yeah. I know. And then you get that order from Checker and you're like, oh, okay.
Right. It's good.
It's all good.
It's money.
It's money.
Counting.
I want the money. Right. Exactly. But then you just know that it's like 2 more hours of packing. Okay. But the PDF sales are good. That's really more of and the nice thing about them is that they're passive income.
Right. And I think a lot of what I do are obviously paper piece blocks. And so it's nice to buy PDF because you can just print your foundation.
Right.
So it's really...
It makes sense as a product.
Right. It's the easier way.
Because you print it out, it all fits on one page probably. Sometimes, or you can easily tape it together in just a few pages, unlike maybe a blouse where it's going to be many pages.
Right.
Yeah. And you can cut it out and start sewing that evening if you wanted to.
Yep. And it also is not very cost effective to print a single block pattern on paper because you have to charge pretty much the same as you would a whole quilt pattern by the time you add in those, because sometimes it's 4 or 5 pages of pattern pieces for one block for some of the more complicated paper pieces, like picture blocks that I have. So I've never found a way to do that successfully in a printed format.
Right. Okay. So PDF works better, really. And when you think about the sort of pie chart of your income, do the patterns make up, or the PDF patterns make up a good portion of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That combined with the teaching and lecturing.
Yeah. Right.
Pretty much like half and half.
It's about half and half.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's interesting to hear for people to know. Yeah, for sure. And then you sell on Etsy, and then you have your own e-commerce shop as well. What platform is that on, your own shop?
It's just WooCommerce.
On WooCommerce.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what mine is too. Yeah. Which is works with WordPress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
And I find that they both have different audiences. Some people just like to shop on Etsy, and some people go to your website. So it's nice to have both.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would never get rid of Etsy. I think, why not? It's easy,
right.
And it's right there.
Once you put all the listings there.
But once you've written a listing, then you might as well copy and paste it, in two spots, because, did you sell on Craftsy before Craftsy annihilated their marketplace? Yes. Oh, that's right. We talked about this. Yeah. I wrote a little piece about it.
They left my shop, but then they removed all of my patterns but my one free pattern.
Right.
So that with your recommendation, I added it to my newsletter as a free pattern for anyone who subscribes, which has worked out really well.
Right. So you took that free pattern off of Craftsy.
Yeah, I figured why leave that for them if they took all my paid patterns off.
Which they were using, and you made it as a lead magnet for your newsletter subscribers. Much better use of your free pattern for sure. Help it build your business rather than build theirs.
Right.
Right. Okay, good. I'm glad that worked out well. And I remember a while back, did you make like Little House on the Prairie quilt blocks? I just want to make sure we touch on them because they were so cool. Was it with both of your daughters?
I did. Once you do something with one,
you have to do it with the other one. So, and I read Little House on the Prairie I have 3 daughters, so been through it many times, the entire series. But
I read it all with my son too. So
good.
Everyone got it.
Everyone got it. And so, do you want to talk a little bit about what those were? Because I thought they were so lovely.
Sure. So I wanted my girls, well, at the time, my daughter Lily, to read the series. She was in 3rd grade. She wasn't interested. She liked reading unicorn and fantasy kind of books, which is good too. But I wanted her to experience what I had, and I wanted her to read those books. So I was trying to think of well, how can I make a bribe? And I said, what if you read the book, then we talk about it, and we come up with a quilt block, and you get to sew it with me? Because they always want to sew in my sewing room because they see me doing that all the time. And that worked. She was like, oh, okay. So it just started that way. It wasn't a planned project that I was going to be sharing. But once I decided I was going to do this, I thought, well, why not share it in case other people want to make them with their children too? So we just, as she read the books, and sometimes I'd read aloud with her to push her through
some of the chapters get right. They're like, now we're going to describe how Pa put in the door for 3 pages. Yeah.
We had to skim a little.
Yeah.
But, we would focus on the fun parts. Right. And, that could be a block. And, if you finish. So let's get through that last chapter. But it was really fun to kind of pick the highlights of each story, like El Manzo's prize-winning pumpkin became a block, things like that. And so we designed the quilt. She sewed each of the blocks herself. I did the cutting and the ironing, and then she chose all of her own fabrics. She did all the stitching. Then I did the final quilting for her. And because it's a small town, it got to hang at the library for a while. So she had it hanging there for about a month, and she had her picture in the paper. So it was very exciting for her. And then a few years later, I repeated the whole process with my daughter, Penny. And so that was just last year that she finished her quilt. And so I took it into both of their classrooms too. And we talked about it with the class so they could see. And Penny's got to hang at the library too, because you can't have one and not the other. So she had hers there too. But it was very fun to see how different the 2 quilts look, because they both chose all their fabrics, and so their personalities kind of came through. Lily wanted hers more realistic colors, so she chose the blues and the greens and the browns. Penny went for pink and purple and all sorts of non-representational colors. So I got a couple pictures of the girls with both of their quilts too. And so you can find this all on my website. Up the top bar, it says sew-alongs, and there's a Little House on the Prairie sew-along. So I guess that is a sew-along. And I said I didn't do sew-alongs, but it wasn't intended as a sew-along initially. Right. It wasn't like an organized sew-along. It was more like, if you want to, you can. Here's where everything is.
But I love the tie into literature, and I love that it started as a bribe for them. But
to be honest here, it was.
But it's really neat, and I just wanted to make sure we highlighted that because I really like.
And those are all still there; they're available.
Yeah, for people to check out. So, all right, I want to make sure we get to your recommendations. So, you wanted to recommend Trader Joe's Candy Cane Green Tea, which it sounds like you're like sort of finishing up as we get into sort of hopefully spring. Although there's, I don't know, a foot and change of snow on the ground still here.
Yeah, that's my favorite. One of my favorite teas in the winter, and so we buy a couple. My husband, who drives to Cambridge every day, drives by Trader Joe's on the way home. So he picks up some of those and drink them throughout the winter to stay warm and just get me through until spring.
It's always good to know those Trader Joe's favorites, you know? It's like you always have those things at Trader Joe's that are like, you have to have, you know? And it's good to hear.
And I don't get there very often.
I know.
Myself, so it's like what he might pick up and bring home. So
Right, exactly. I know. It's like you have to go there. And then sometimes they don't have your favorite things because they're seseasonal, right?
Yeah,
they
that's
take
why
them
we have
out.
to stock
You're
up
like,
on
I
the
gotta
candy,
buy it
I'm
now.
sure they don't have that anymore now.
Right, exactly.
I think I have 3 tea bags left. I'm rationing them now.
That's the end. Okay, so you have a daylight wafer light box, and I've seen these. They're super cool.
They are.
I always want to like use my iPad. It's like in some way to do this. I feel like there's got to be a way to make your iPad just like white, you know, like white light, and to be. But I haven't figured this. I haven't tried, but I feel like. But can you explain how you use a light box and for paper piecing and like what a light box is?
So it's so helpful for paper piecing, especially in these dreary winter months and at night when you don't have a lot of daylight. With paper piecing, you need to see if your fabric is at least 1/4 of an inch over the black line on the paper. And so you need to be able to hold it up to a light source. So oftentimes you'll see people paper piecing, holding things up like above their heads to the light.
Or you can use a window, right?
Or a window, and it's really awkward and it takes forever. So having a light box, which is just flat on your table, providing a lot of bright light, just makes it so much easier. You can work much more effectively. You can fussy cut things. Like my Tell Me a Story block swap starts with a fussy cut in the center. You can just put the fabric down, put the foundation on top, adjust it just the way you want, and put a pin on it. It's so much faster. I didn't use a light box until about maybe 2 years ago now, and it just increased my production. Like it was just so much faster than it was before. I couldn't believe.
Sometimes getting the right tool is just worth it. Do you remember how much it costs?
I think it's about like 100-ish, depending on what deal is being offered at the time.
Right. So if you know you're going to, and there's other uses for it, if you're going to be tracing things, you know, I mean, there's lots of other uses for it.
It's good for like if you're making a quilt label, if you want to put lined paper down and then put your fabric on top of it, you can write and not have your quilt label go downhill.
Right. You're going to find other uses for it once you have it. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's good for, they have a clear cutting mat that you can put on top of your light box. So now you can both cut and piece.
I didn't know they had a clear cutting mat. That is so clever.
Yes, it is. And it's really kind of neat because if you're fussy cutting,
you
can see the fabric and you can just cut with your ruler.
Oh my gosh.
So that would be a not paper piecing.
So cool. I'm going to try to link to the clear cut. I'm making a note. To the clear cutting mat.
What they did tell me at Daylight is you don't want to just put a cutting mat on any light box because it has to be able to withstand the pressure of the rotary cutting. So theirs was designed.
So don't put it on your iPad, which is what I just recommended earlier.
Yeah, and that would also crack. Yeah,
that would be a bad scene. Ours is already cracked, so it's no problem because my daughter dropped it face down on the. Okay, so it's already ruined. It's all fine. All right, and then thumbing through seed catalogs. It sounds like you enjoy gardening. Yeah.
Well, and as they come in over the winter, it's nice because you don't have color outside, and so a lot of times I'll come up with color combinations by looking at the flowers in my garden. This plant grew next to this plant, and I'm wearing this color shirt today, and I look down and I notice that all 3 go well, and that was how I came up with colors for one of my quilts. And so in the winter there's none of that. So as the seed catalogs come in, I like to flip through and just look at the different color combinations either within a flower or in groups of flowers. And it also just gives me hope, like color's coming, spring is coming.
We have such a short growing season. I feel like it's like you better get out there as soon as possible.
I do.
And the plants, I feel like in New England know that, and they're like, grow, as soon as, you know, there's a sign that's possible. But that's a great idea, looking through the colors in the seed catalog.
I feel like I'm more adventurous with the colors in my garden than I am with the colors in my quilt sometimes. I think it's because it's easy just to dig up a quilt. You can't dig up a quilt. You can dig up a flower and move it. And so like if you decide you don't like the way it looks, you just dig it up and move it. But with fabric, obviously, once you've stitched it all together, it's harder. No turning back.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I wouldn't want to rip it all out. So it's fun to play with those color combinations in the yard and then move them inside.
And you use Electric Quilt to do your designing, right? So that's how you're playing with the colors before you're committing. Yeah,
and I usually just use solid colors in my quilt planning. So even if I'm going to use a patterned fabric, I'll just add that in at the actual piecing time. Like I don't scan all my fabrics in and place them exactly. I just use EQ to give myself the general idea of how things will look and what look I'm going for.
Right. Cool. And have you played with pre-quilt?
I haven't.
It's neat.
So I don't know if it's for foundation piecing.
Yeah, it might not be.
I don't think it is. And since that's really all I like to do.
All you like to do. It doesn't work quite yet.
Right. So that's why EQ is great for me, because you draw the block and you tell EQ where your sections are and how you want them numbered. And then it just separates them all for you and you can print them out. So it adds the quarter seam allowance around each section. So that's a huge time savings.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Walshing Ups podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for having me in your home. It's been great.
Thanks.
And you've been listening to the Walshing Ups podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Visit my blog, walshingups.com, where you can sign up for my email newsletter to get the best in sewing, blogging, and small business delivered right to your inbox each week. This episode was sponsored by The Artist JD, a place designed to add ease to the legalese of running your creative business. It's way easier and cheaper to start your business off with a strong foundation than to fix it later when problems arise. So if you're running your business part-time or just starting off, then you should consider joining the Artist Courtyard. It functions as your creative business's legal guide, mentor, sounding board, and resource library. Visit theartistjd.com to learn more and use the coupon code WHILESHENAPS at checkout to get 50% off your first month. Thank you so much, The Artist JD. And if you enjoy the show, tell a friend about it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.